Hi, Larry Elderman here today, and today I will be giving you 4 solutions to duplicate or exceed the functionality of a cycle stop valve. Now on this page I'm giving you an index so you can jump around because I like to talk and I like to give a lot of background and I like to explain everything, and some people don't like that. They say too much talking. So if you want to go directly to the solutions, you can go here to solution 1, solution 2, solution 3, or solution 4. But if you are willing to bear with me, just start from the beginning, listen to the whole thing, and I think you'll learn something. Okay, let's get into it. Okay, so if you watch my other videos, you'll know that I'm not really a big fan of cycle stop valves. I think it's an overpriced product. I think the company misrepresents what they can do. Most of the time there's a better way to do things than a cycle stop valve, and I'm just not fond of the product. But nevertheless, I get a lot of comments from people that claim that they love their cycle stop valve, and the comments usually go something like this. With my cycle stop valve, I get constant water pressure and no cycling during long runs of water usage. It does what they say it does. Why do you disparage this wonderful product? So let's talk about that now. Let's talk about why I disparage this product, even though it does do these 2 things that they say it does: constant water pressure and no cycling during long runs of water. Okay, so here are some real-life comments I got from some of my viewers. Hey mister, have you ever installed a cycle stop valve, or are you just making speculation based on theoretical values? I used to have a standard system with 2 tanks, 90 gallons each, and I got tired of replacing pumps 4 times in 30 years. Because I was watering lots of plants as well as household usage. Since I replaced the old system for a CSV, I don't have to hear the pump coming on and off, and it's not dead yet. You are probably representing some big pressure tank companies. Just leave people alone. No, I'm not representing any big pressure companies. I have no preset agenda. I'm independent. Next comment. I disagree with this analysis. The valve works. Had one for years. Pumps last longer. Pressure tanks last longer. I have a 3 horsepower pump and use hundreds of thousands of gallons a month. This valve does exactly what it says it will do. Well, yeah, it keeps the pressure constant and the pump doesn't cycle. But if you're using that much water with a 3 horsepower pump, man, you're wasting a lot of electricity. Okay, next comment. Going on 10 years with my CSV and pump still going strong and constant pressure. I was skeptical, but it works. Yeah, again, you're going to get constant pressure and no cycling on long runs. So if that's what you're considering, you got what you want. Okay, going on 10 years, no problems, constant pressure, no cycling. Again, you're focusing on these 2 things and you're getting those 2 things, so you think you are happy. Well, you're happy, but you don't know that you shouldn't be happy. Okay, let's continue. So I want to give an analogy to these people that are so happy with their cycle stop valves. So suppose you have a leak in your faucet and you hire a plumber who replaces the faucet and some of the plumbing at a cost of $500, and your leak is fixed. You are a satisfied customer, and unless somebody tells you that you never realized that the leak could have been fixed by replacing a $1 washer, then you're happy. Then when you're telling someone about the nice plumber that fixed your leak, he says, "Oh, I know that plumber. He's a scam artist." And you say, "How dare you? He fixed my problem and I am a satisfied customer. Why do you put him down?" So you're happy. You never know that you shouldn't be happy, but you never know that you never knew that you could have fixed the problem with a $1 washer. So that's very analogous to what's going on with these cycle stop valves. Okay, so let's talk about the profile of a cycle stop valve lover. They desire constant pressure, and they do get that, sort of. I'll talk about the sort of in a second. They desire no cycling during long runs, and they get it. So they get these 2 items from a CSV, so they are happy. They are not aware that there's a better way. In particular, they are not aware or don't care that they could have solved the problem at a far lower cost. They are not aware or don't care that they are wasting significant amounts of electricity. They are not aware or don't care that in many or most cases the pump is actually going on more often, because the pump goes on every time you use water, including flushing toilets and washing your hands, and that would not be happening with a regular system. And they are not aware or don't care that in reality a CSV only provides constant pressure when it stabilizes. On first water usage, the pressure dips significantly and then climbs back up before stabilizing. So now I want to point out that this video is for the CSV lover. A lot of times there are solutions to these problems which are far better than using a CSV, and I talk about a lot of those solutions in my other videos. But in this video, I'm going to assume that you have your heart set on a CSV or CSV functionality. In this video, we'll show you how to duplicate CSV functionality, only better, and save money at the same time. So you'll get a better solution similar to a CSV, but better and for less money. Okay, in this picture, I'm showing you a picture of a cycle stop valve kit. It's a cycle stop valve along with a pressure tank and a pressure switch and a pressure gauge all together. And I got this picture and the prices directly from the cycle stop valve website. And they're selling this little kit for $497, which I think is tremendously overpriced, but that's what they sell it for. And I'm going to show you how you could save a lot of money. So let's go on to the next slide. Okay, in this picture I'm going to show you some of the equipment that you will be using, or that we can use to find better solutions to the cycle stop valve. So this is the equipment I'll be showing you in my 4 solutions to improving a cycle stop valve. This is called a paddle flow detector, and you can install this in your system to detect when there's water flow, and this is very useful in some certain circumstances. This is a pressure reducing valve. It's similar to a cycle stop valve, except it doesn't have the internal leak. It only costs $80 for a high quality pressure reducing valve. Of course, you're going to need miscellaneous piping and electrical. You're going to need a small water pressure tank, which sells for about $60, a pressure switch, which sells for about $21, and a pressure gauge, which sells for about $13. All this equipment together goes for about $220 versus the previous picture I showed you where the kit cost $497. So this is the equipment I'll be using. Okay, on this page I will give you an overview of the 4 solutions that I will be presenting. And these solutions duplicate or exceed CSV functionality while saving you money. So the first solution, solution 1, is almost an exact duplicate of a CSV functionality for way less money. It does almost exactly what a CSV valve does, except it's more adjustable than a regular CSV. The second solution is how to make a way better CSV that solves practically all the problems associated with a CSV, but admittedly it is somewhat complicated and uses a number of electrical devices. The third solution is kind of not really a cycle stop valve, but it's a way that you can get constant pressure that cycles during long runs but saves you cycles for short runs. So a cycle stop valve is good for long runs. It won't cycle during long runs, but the problem is it cycles every time you turn on the water. In solution 3 here, it's kind of the opposite. You will get cycling during long runs, but you will avoid cycling during short runs, but you will still get the constant pressure that you desire. And solution 4 is kind of like the best solution, best all-around solution in my opinion. It's a simple way to make a better CSV for less money. It's simple and better in a number of ways in which I will explain. So let's start in and get going on our 4 solutions. Okay, so this first solution I already showed in one of my previous videos. In the video, cycle stop valves are bad for pressure tank systems, condensed version. Here's the URL for that. And I already presented it, but when I presented it, I sort of just presented it in passing. I didn't really explain it, and a lot of people got confused. And particularly they got confused by this bypass thing here, and they didn't understand that you have to set this valve so that you only get a trickle of water, what a cycle stop valve calls a dribble of water, their patent. And so by getting a dribble of water that bypasses the pressure reducing valve, you essentially get exactly what a cycle stop valve is. So what a cycle stop valve is a pressure reducing valve with a leak inside. And if you don't believe me, you can go to their patent page, which is right here, and I say, remember, CSV is simply a pressure reducing valve with an internal leak in it. The patent description refers to this leak as a dribble flow. and you can view the patent, which is expired, at this site. And if you view this patent, you will see that a cycle stop valve is simply a pressure reducing valve with an internal leak. So let's go back to my picture now. And what it is so usually the cycle stop valve will have the internal leak here, but instead of having it in here, I buy the pressure reducing valve, which doesn't have the leak, but I reproduced the leak by having this bypass. So some people got confused. They thought that every time you turn on the water, you have to turn this valve or something. No, you adjust this valve, and then after you adjust the valve, you forget about it. So what the valve does is it produces a small flow that bypasses the pressure reducing valve. So what happens is if you turn on a lot of water, this has very little effect because it only allows a tiny bit of water through. So most of the water is coming through this pressure reducing valve, which limits the pressure to 50 pounds in this example. I didn't put the 50 here, but I should have. The pressure switch is set to 40-60, and the cycle stop valve is set at 50 pounds, or this pressure reducing valve is set at 50 pounds. Now this system more or less duplicates a cycle stop valve, but it's actually better because you can adjust the dribble, the bypass. So if you get a very small bypass, so what happens is this, as long as the water is on, as long as you're using water, the water is passing through the CSV, and the pressure tank never fills up to 60 because not enough water is coming through. The maximum pressure is 50 pounds, and the pressure tank needs 60 pounds before it will shut off. So, and only after you turn off the water does the water dribble through this bypass and go into the pressure tank at a very slow rate and refill the pressure tank. And with a cycle stop valve, that rate is preset to about 1 gallon per minute. So even if you have a small pressure tank, this might take 30 seconds or a minute to refill at this slow rate. Now with this water gate valve here, you can adjust the bypass rate. Now if you adjust it too slow, it will take a long time to refill the pressure tank. And if you adjust it too fast, you might get cycling, which you are trying to avoid because you don't want cycling. It's a cycle stop valve. But this gives you the option of adjusting this valve to as high a value as possible and avoid the cycling, which will take some experimentation. But once you have experimented correctly, you can set this valve to that value and forget about it, and you will get the no cycling on the long runs, and the pressure tank will fill up faster than it would with a cycle stop valve because you've set the dribble rate, the bypass rate, to your custom setting for your custom system. Okay, and this system can be made for more or less about $200. Okay, so now let's go on to solution 2. Okay, I'm not going to talk too much about solution 2 in this video because I've already made a whole video dedicated to solution 2. And the video is called Make Your Own DIY Cycle Stop Valve from These Parts, Better, Cheaper, More Efficient, Less Cycles. And this is the URL. You can search my name and it will DIY and it will come up. But the only thing I want to say about this system is that it solves practically every problem associated with a cycle stop valve. It produces a really good system. It produces high constant pressure and no cycling, and it solves some of the other problems like like the pressure dip and rise on first startup and the slow refill rate of the pressure tank. It solves almost every problem. But the thing is, it is somewhat complicated. Carrie Austin referred to it disparagingly as a Rube Goldberg device. So it is a little complicated and probably not for everybody. If you do it, it's going to be really good. But if you don't want this, I would understand. But if you want to get into how this works, go to this video. Make your own DIY cycle stop valve from these parts, better, cheaper, more efficient. And here is the URL, or just search my name, or just look at the playlist. Okay, let's go on to the next solution. So solution 3 is for those that desire constant pressure being the most important thing. And they also want to avoid the pump going on every time they wash their hands or flush the toilet, but they're willing to live with the pump cycling during long runs. It's kind of the opposite of a cycle stop valve. The cycle stop valve will go on, the pump will go on every time you use the water for short runs like flushing the toilet or washing your hands, but it will avoid cycling during long runs. This is kind of the opposite. It will avoid cycling for short runs like flushing a toilet or washing your hands, but it will still cycle during long runs. So let's look at the way this works. Okay, what you do is you have a pressure reducing valve. Let's say you want your pressure set to 50 psi. Okay, now what you do is you set your pressure switch to 50 to 70. So the tank will never go below 50. The tank will go from 50 to 70. Now, as you use water, the pump will go on and off, filling the tank to 70 and then reducing to 50 before it goes off. Meanwhile, since the tank is never below 50 pounds, it cycles from 50 to 70, this pressure reducing valve on the output will limit the output to 50 psi, and you will get a constant pressure of 50 psi all the time. Now, there's also an advantage to this, several advantages over a cycle stop valve with this system. When the water goes off, when you stop using water, the pressure tank will fill up, and it will fill up at a regular rate. It won't be filling up at this dribble rate of 1 gallon per minute. It will fill up quickly. And then the next time you use the water, when you start up your water again, you won't get the fluctuation. So with the cycle stop valve, you get the dip, and then you get the rise, and then you get the stable. But here, since you're starting at 70 psi, but you have a cycle stop valve, you have a pressure reducing valve reducing it to 50, you'll never get any fluctuation. So whereas a cycle stop valve has a fluctuation at the beginning of a run, every time it will fluctuate at the beginning of a run before it becomes constant. But here you will have a constant pressure the whole time. Okay, and now I want to talk about the pressure tank for a little while. The pressure tank used for solution 3. You can make this pressure tank any size you want, and the bigger it is, the better, unless you don't want to pay that much or unless you don't have the room. In general, the bigger the better. So what happens when you have this big pressure tank is that it fills up, let's say, to 70 pounds, and then the pump goes off, and the pump will not go back on until the pressure tank goes back down to 50 psi, and then the pump will go on because this pressure switch is set to 50-70. So if you have a large pressure tank here, you can get a lot of short runs. You can get a lot of washing your hands, washing a dish, flushing a toilet. You can do that quite a number of times before the pump will go back on. Whereas with a cycle stop valve, you need a very small pressure tank, and every time you use water, the pump will go on. Now, cycle stop valve likes to say, oh, there's no reason you can't put a large pressure tank with a cycle stop valve. Oh, yes, there is. There's a very big reason why you can't use a large pressure tank with a cycle stop valve. In fact, two reasons. The first is the problem with the fluctuation, in that when you turn on a cycle stop valve, first the pressure tank has to empty down to its low value, and then it has to reach its mid value before it goes off. If you have a large pressure tank, that means that you'll get a long period of unstable pressure before it finally stabilizes. The other problem with a large pressure tank and a cycle stop valve is this: when the water stops being used, the pressure tank has to fill back up, and it's only filling back up at a dribble rate of 1 gallon per minute. So if you have a large pressure tank, the pump is going to be on for many minutes filling up this pressure tank. So really, you're forced to use a very small tank with a cycle stop valve system. Now with this system, you can have a large tank without any penalty, because when the water stops being used, the pressure tank will be filled up at the full rate. There's no dribble flow. And when you start using water again, you don't have this long period of unstable pressure. The pressure starts at 50 immediately and stays at 50 for the rest of the time, which does not happen with a cycle stop valve. And in particular, a cycle stop valve with a large pressure tank would cause you to have very unstable pressure at the beginning of the run before it stabilizes. Okay, so this is solution 4. which gives very similar functionality to a regular CSV with three advantages. Those advantages being that when the pressure tank is refilled, it refills at the full rate, not at a dribble rate. The second advantage being that when you start up the system, you don't get the initial fluctuation of water pressure. You get a constant water pressure immediately. And the third advantage being, of course, it's much cheaper. So let's see how this system works. We're able to avoid the problems with that the CSV has by adding a new component called a flow sensor. A flow sensor is a piece of equipment that you can install in the pipe, and it detects when there's a flow of water. So when there's no flow of water, the circuit is open, which means no electricity can pass through the switch. And when it detects water, the switch is closed. Now, if you look at this pump, it's set up so that the pump will go on in two different cases. If the flow detector is detecting water being used, the pump will go on. If the pressure switch finds that the pressure goes below 40, the pressure switch will turn on the pump until the pressure tank reaches 60. This is set up so that if either of these are on, the pump will go on. This could be on and the pump will go on. This could be on and this could be off and the pump will go on. This could be on and this could be off and the pump will go on. Or they both can be on and the pump will be on. So let's see how this works. Let's go to an initial state and go from there. Suppose the water is off. We have the pressure tank filled up to 60 pounds, as it should be. Now let's say you start using water. So what happens is you start using water, and water is coming out of this. So somebody opens up a tap over here in the house, and water starts coming out of this pressure tank through the system. And what happens, even if the pressure switch is showing, it has the pump off, the water that's stored in the pressure tank will cause there to be a flow that goes through here. And as soon as this flow sensor detects a flow, the flow sensor will turn on the pump, and the pump will pump water at this pressure reducing valve, which is set to 50 psi. And since the water is continually being used, the flow sensor is continually being on, and the pump will stay on, and you'll get a constant pressure of 50 psi. Now, eventually, the person using the water will turn off the water. And what happens when they turn off the water? One of two things will happen. Either the pressure tank is already not filling, either the pressure switch is already not on, so because the pressure is already sufficient, so the pressure switch will not activate the pump, and the flow sensor will detect that there's no flow anymore because you've turned off the water, and so the pump will go off. The other case is you turn off the water, so the flow sensor detects no water, so that will be off, but the pressure switch could still detect that the pressure is below 40, and so it will continue to run the pump until the pressure tank reaches 60, and then it will turn off. Okay, and then it will be ready for the next time you use the water. You turn on the water. Okay, the pressure tank provides the initial flow, which turns on the flow sensor. The pump goes on, and it will stay on at 50 psi continually. With this system, you get 50 psi all the time. There's no fluctuation at the beginning of the run. And there's no problem with the dribble flow, so the pressure tank will fill up quickly. And you can choose to have a small pressure. There's no reason not to have a small pressure tank, because the system will go on every time you use water, just like a cycle stop valve. It won't cycle, but it will go on every time you use water. So like a cycle stop valve will go on when you wash your hands or flush the toilet, but like a cycle stop valve, it will not cycle during a long run. And you will get constant pressure without the fluctuation at the beginning, and it will fill up this little tank quickly because it's not using the dribble rate. So it's better, and it's cheaper than a cycle stop valve. Okay, so that's the end of my video. I hope you liked it, and I hope you learned something, and I hope you can use the information to save you money. And if you want to become an expert, you can look at all my other videos about cycle stop valves and the way to avoid cycle stop valves and all the things that are wrong with cycle stop valves. And if you want to look at those, fine. If not, that's okay. But at least now you know that if you don't want a cycle stop valve, fine. And if you do want a cycle stop valve, you don't have to pay the exorbitant price that the company charges you. You can set up your system on your own and save a lot of money. Okay, that's all for now. Thank you and goodbye.